Let's talk about adding a new look to your landscape with a small cost and a high price $1,000,000 look. First off, you're going to be or should be concerned about your turf or your lawn or your grass. There are many types of grass used for a front/backyard, commonly known as turf in the landscaping business. I'll list my favorite being the most expensive and my least expensive favorite. Number one is zoysia. Zoysia is a very difficult grass to keep green and rich in its thickness if you live in a colder region and if you have restrictions on watering. Zoysia requires a lot of tender care simply because it will become dormant like most grass in the wintertime with a lack of water to stay alive. This could be early spring if you live in a drought region and you would have to fight all summer to bring it back just because, one, you're in the drought and you're fighting basically the grass to rehydrate itself, and then you could be faced with a winter condition due to the changing in seasons and not even have a real luscious looking front yard. That's the expensive grass. Bermuda is a lot cheaper when you're buying it in flats or known as sod, which is strips probably about this long, about this wide, and they come in pallets usually delivered by a semi. Bermuda, on the other hand, is as green and lush as zoysia, in my opinion. It stands out compared to zoysia in droughts in northern regions due to its durability and climates, but it can also be weaker than zoysia in a category of disease and failure to outgrow patches of different breeds of grass. What I mean by that, if you have a front yard that's consistently Bermuda year-round and you find brighter green or darker brown splotches of different breeds of grass, they'll usually grow up and they'll look like a weed. Well, that could be fescue, that could be zoysia, that could be dandelions, that could be any type of unwanted growth, which most people would call as a weed because it doesn't match the other. Well, that area of Bermuda below that weed or that grass that's growing up could start to die off or breed away from it because it's not able to receive the sunlight, the nutrients on a daily basis as the rest of the turf is. So you have your grass picked. You've discovered how to plant it and water it and feed it on a daily basis to make it grow with water restrictions in place. So I'd like to talk about islands. I would recommend pine straw as a first choice for covering the island. Pine straw is cheap, it's plentiful, and you can basically get it anywhere there are pine trees at, or any type of lawn and garden area or nursery. Pine straw, like I said, is cheap and it brightens up the area, makes it pop, if you will. Pine straw is cheap compared to most island additives and will last for quite a while. Not a lot of maintenance is required with pine straw islands. Same as most other islands, you'll have some grass or weeds grow up through it trying to get the sunlight and getting water, which you just pick by hand. I would also recommend using red bark. If you've ever seen a real nice neighborhood that's usually in the upper 200,000 for purchase, you'll see that they have a real sharp looking landscape, which is very expensive to add, and the bark around the house or around the islands leading up to the mailbox or to a driveway, whatever it is, they usually use red bark. Red bark makes the island pop. It makes it stand out. It makes the grass look greener. It makes the driveway look cleaner. Because it makes the island pop, it shows the contours of the designs, and the landscape looks very upscale, like I said. So we've talked about our grass, our islands, what we would use as grass and what we would use for filling in our islands. I would like to talk about what kind of flowers you could put in your islands, or like some people have, they've put patches of flowers in their grass and just cut around it. Not actually trimmed or edged that area to make it look sharper, just make it look more like a natural look. Picking flowers can be difficult due to climate and placement, due to the aggressive growth of flowers. And when I say that, some flowers grow faster than the others, some flowers grow wider or taller. Depending on what type of flower you're putting with your selection, you could have a difference in growth and then that opposite flower that you already have or that you bought not make it or outgrow what you already have. I can explain this best as one flower growing faster than another and then making the other plant die off due to lack of nutrients and sunlight. Pansies are an easy flower to grow and do really well in winter. Pansies are probably about the only flower that can withstand the coldest climates, as well as early spring. Early spring you have fluctuation of temperatures. One day it'll be 90 degrees, that night it could be 40 degrees. The next day it could be 60 degrees outside, that night could be 20 degrees. The pansies will survive in that climate. These flowers require weekly maintenance. When the flower head dies, a pod grows. So using my hand as an example, here's the flower. The flower dies off and a pod comes back up. This pod has seeds in it, so you're going to grab the stem where the pod meets the stem and you're going to pull that pod off. By doing that, a flower will grow back. The plant requires 6 inches in circumference from other plants. Usually if you take your hand from here to here is usually about 6 inches in an average man or woman's hand, and you put it at the center of the flower like so. Here's one flower, you plant the other one right here. Very simple. After the winter you will need a spring-summer flower in your garden, island, lawn to last throughout the season. My choice is a begonia. Very easy to maintain and require little of maintenance other than watering regularly and fertilization once a month. The begonia is very thick in its density. It's got a lot of water in its body, and if you break it off to trim it, you'll notice that water will flow out of it. It's a very, very low maintenance flower, like I said, and it's very cheap as well. So you have your grass, your islands, and your flowers. Let's throw some bushes or shrubs into play. We were able to identify a couple of flowers, like I said, for 2 different times of the year. Shrubs are a lot easier in selecting because of the variety and the lack of climate effect shrubs have. If a person wants a large in size when thinking about width, height, a holly would fit perfect. Hollies grow huge, wide, and fat. Once planted and maintained for a couple of years, the growth and flourish of its limbs and leaves will astonish the consumer. You can have a holly that is as tall as the tallest building, meaning 1 to 2 stories, and as wide as a driveway. I've seen hollies just enormous, and they're beautiful because in the transition of seasons they'll have little red berries. Caution that these could be poisonous to animals and kids, but they have the little red berries, and a lot of people associate that as a Christmas or holiday type of shrub. Another great shrub commonly used on most homes because of the ability to be shaped and carved into many designs are Ribes alpiniums. They're a bush that have little bitty leaves and they're full of thickness. They don't grow as fast as a holly, but they're very, very landscape orientated. If you plant this shrub in a crazy designed or outlined landscape, people usually tend to trim the bush into circles or into hearts. Very commonly known show, Edward Scissorhands. The bushes that he normally trims into the dinosaur, the heart, the person, is, like I said, the alpiniums. But remember, you gotta select your turf, you gotta select your islands, you gotta be cheap and somewhat pricey at the same time. You gotta know what flowers go where and what type of seasons, and you gotta have a good shrub to balance out the landscape. Just don't do too much back-breaking work, and buy what you can with what dollar you have.